Welcome back, everyone, to Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD podcast. We'll be right back with Dr. Meghan Bunning of FSU Coach. But first, let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Final Forms for their support of the Educational AD podcast. Final Forms is the industry leader in registration, but you got to know this. Final Forms is more than just registration and forms. Final Forms is a team. It's technology, and it's a service that serves schools with things like compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with things like mobile accessibility, has reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and about all the forms that go with being an athlete. Final Forms can help with team communication and attendance and even certification management for coaches. And for athletic directors, Final Forms helps with eligibility, with reports and rosters, all the things that come across your desk. And it does this with secure language translation and ADA compliance. You know, it's time for you to talk with a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps and find out what Final Forms can do for you, go to finalforms.com/Jake. That's finalforms.com/Jake and find out exactly what Final Forms can do for you. We also want to thank Violet Defense for their support. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Go to violetdefense.com for more information about their great products. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department these days, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while also creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call them at 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com and see exactly what their fantastic products can do for you and your program. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles, along with an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history, along with your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589, or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle for their support. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to elevate the performance of their teams using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics and a whole lot more. Huddle's also built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way through high school and college programs. And even the pros use Huddle to help their teams play at the highest level. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get your kids recruited to at the college level. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We also want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your program by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also connects you with the parents and the student athletes that really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the folks at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them show you how to take your athletic program from good to great. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. Back with us is a good friend, Dr. Meghan Bunning. She's from Florida State University, FSU coach. Got quite an athletic background. She's a researcher. She's a professor. She was a former D1 athlete, a D1 coach. She's continues to be an analyst, some on-air talent for the Southeast Conference Network. She's a mental performance coach. She can take cutting edge research and explain it to a dope like me and how we can use it in our world of athletics and leadership. So Dr. Meghan Bunning, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy speaking with you.
Okay. Well, I know our listeners enjoy hearing some of your wisdom. So what do you have for us on this episode?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. So I was telling you that I was thinking about topics and wanted to bring in the mental performance element this time, and had recently read Annie Duke's book called Thinking in Bets, Making Smarter Decisions When You Don't Have All the Facts. If you have not read this book as a leader who has to make decisions, I would highly recommend her book. She's a former professional poker player and now is an author and a speaker and has several #1 bestsellers. So some of the information I'm going to present to you kind of pulls from the ideas that she brings to the table in her effort to help people make better decisions. The reason I pulled this was because there are several mental performance type elements that I was seeing as I was reading the information. So I kind of framing this around when you have a decision to make. So as athletic directors, as coaches, even just people individually, we are always having to make decisions. And so when we make decisions, basically we're betting. We're making bets on what will happen or won't happen. And a lot of times we kind of take this mindset of we're going to make a bet of this will happen. This will be a better future than what is going on right now. But in Annie's book, what you're going to read is that just like with bets, you very rarely in situations have all the information. And so some of what is needed just isn't available to you. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle that down the road. So one thing that I wanted to bring out, and I'm going to have kind of two key points in this talk, and this is where that mental performance gets in, is this confirmation bias. This is the first key point. And so I'm going to define that, but I want to tell you something very quickly. This is kind of, I call it crazy research. Dr. Dan Gilbert, many of you may have heard of him. He's a famous social psychologist at Harvard. He's done many shows and books and those kinds of things. But his research has shown that people only need to hear or read something to believe it's true. Okay, so think about that. We only need to hear it or read it, and then we tend to take that as truth, and then we only may go back and confirm what we hear or read if we have time, or if we really kind of stop and think about it. So what we would like to have happen is we hear or read something, and then we kind of dig into it to confirm if it's true or not, and then we decide if we want to believe it or not. But it doesn't often happen that way, right? So confirmation bias comes in when we're making decisions big time and when we're working with people. And what this is where we as individuals tend to focus or favor the evidence or information that confirms what we already believe or think will happen. Okay, so I think I've talked previously about the ladder of inference. And so we're going to see the ladder of inference come in as I talk through some of this too. So this confirmation bias is particularly strong when you're dealing with issues that are emotionally charged or ones that are already deeply rooted in our beliefs, even things that we're more confident on. So think if you're having to make a decision and you have people in the room or you yourself, you're really confident that you think you know what the answer is or what the right way to do things, then you're going to seek evidence that's going to confirm what you believe. All right. So what we also know about this confirmation bias is that when people are firmly rooted in their belief about something, even if you present evidence that goes against the contrary, we are still going to kind of dig our heels in and overlook that evidence. I mean, and that's in the research. That's just kind of human nature and kind of what we fall into. And hopefully, as I'm speaking, you can kind of understand where that might be a problem, especially I think about this from working with athletes and other coaches, and then also even students and just peers, when I'm trying to get them to understand a concept or to see another side of things, and they keep just saying that won't work, this works because, and they're overlooking evidence otherwise, okay? So when you're searching for information, this is where bias can come into, confirmation bias. Think about how you're asking questions, all right? So for example, if I ask, is softball more fun to watch than baseball? Notice how I ask that. Is softball more fun to watch than baseball? Well, that's leading. It's one-sided. This is worded what we call affirmatively. So my search results, if I were to go Google, is softball more fun to watch than baseball, may come back with all the ways that softball is more fun. However, and it is, if I ask, which is more fun to watch, baseball or softball, that's much more neutral, okay? So when we're searching for information, that's an example of how confirmation bias can come out. Confirmation bias can come through when you are interpreting information. So are you interpreting what you see here, or the evidence, based on what you already believe? This kind of gets at the root of it. People tend not to change their beliefs on complex issues, even when they're given the evidence that that's not facts, that's not how it is. And they're also more willing and easily accept evidence that confirms their belief, but then they'll critically evaluate evidence that doesn't confirm. So this is important for you as a leader to understand. Confirmation bias comes in even when we remember events. So are you remembering with a bias? Some research shows that people remember evidence that confirms their beliefs, but they completely do not remember disconfirming evidence. How about them apples, right? And so that kind of gets into the stereotypical thoughts as well. So basically, when you hear someone say you have selective memory or selective hearing, we do, all right? So why do we get into this confirmation bias? Why do we do this? Well, because it's an efficient way to process large amounts of information that we come in contact with. If you think about everything that we have to see, hear, process, it's a lot of information on a daily basis. So we kind of tend to jump to conclusions. Also, we do this because when we confirm our beliefs, we're more confident. And we by nature don't want to feel uncomfortable when we're faced with contradictory beliefs. That's called cognitive dissonance. We don't want to feel that way. And so we want to confirm what we're already saying. And so that's important when I deal in the mental performance and work with clients, even students, as you educators know, we're trying to get them to feel uncomfortable in many situations. But as leaders, when we're walking into a room and having to make certain decisions or interact with people, are we willing to also feel that uncomfortableness and to have the people in the room feel the same? So before I go on how to overcome this, I'm curious as to what questions you might have about that part of it.
Well, again, as I'm listening to this, I'm putting on, multiple hats. I've got my old coach hat as I'm talking to athletes, and then as an athletic director, talking with coaches or even especially with parents. I can see how this would play out in a parent conversation. And I've got my husband hat on too, and thinking, my wife says, well, you don't remember correctly, or you're remembering incorrectly. So I can see how it all plays out, and it makes perfect sense. Now, how as leaders, as ADs, how can we avoid this bias and do a better job of doing what we're supposed to do, which is help our coaches coach better?
So the first step is understanding what it is, which is that first part that we went through, right? The second step has a few more processes to it. So I want to read you a quote by John Stuart Mill real quick. It says, the only way in which a human being can make some approach to knowing the whole side of a subject is by hearing what can be said about it by persons of every variety and opinion, and studying all modes in which it can be looked at by every character of mind. So basically, that means having many voices, okay? But before, and we're going to talk about how that can look in a meeting, but before you even get that, the people that are in the room making the decisions, you all as leaders, the first thing you need to do is question your own beliefs. And this comes into walking up the ladder of inference, which I know I've talked about before. So some questions you might ask are, what about what I'm thinking, what I'm believing, what might be not true about that belief? Right? So I believe something, what could not be true? What other evidence or data might there be that's helping me form their belief? So you're really trying to get yourself to look at, here's the evidence I pulled, but what am I missing? Did I miss something? Are there other people or areas that have similar beliefs about this where I can go and I can gauge to see if my belief is accurate? So you're kind of saying, someone else believed this. Let me go kind of check out what they believe and see if we're kind of on the same page. What evidence might I have missed, gauged incorrectly, or even minimized when I formed this belief? Remember, if we are trying to confirm our beliefs with that bias, we're minimizing some of that other evidence. We got to bring that to light. What reasons might someone else have a different belief than mine? Why are they believing this differently? So when I'm getting in a confrontation or there's a dissent between what I believe and you believe, well, instead of bucking up and going against you, maybe stop and questioning, that's interesting. Why do you believe that? What evidence are you using to support this? And then think, why might your belief be more accurate than mine? Okay. And then think about what other perspectives are there that could help explain why this decision we made turned out the way it did. So kind of, again, the first step is a self-assessment of sorts. So the decisions that you make are based on your beliefs about the world or the situation. So your decisions are only as strong as your belief system. If you realize that you're starting to make decisions that aren't really working out the way that you hoped, you may need to challenge what you're believing in. Like, what are your beliefs? Because I'm making decisions based off of what I believe. Maybe there's some false or inaccurate beliefs there. So when you hear the team is only as strong as its weakest link, your decisions are only as strong as your most vulnerable belief. Is where that can go. So that's the first step, is really do this self-assessment. Walk yourself up through the ladder of inference and question those beliefs. Look at all the evidence that you may be missing. Challenge yourself. And I think that goes for the other people in the room too. So the next thing you can do is improve metacognition and self-awareness. So metacognition is what we know about what we know. So the knowledge of our knowledge, all right? And there are ways to do this. I know that schools, in the school systems, teachers are doing this with students quite a bit. So why do we as adults stop? You know, so when we get into these leadership situations, the way I can see this, and I'm even thinking with athletes in a team setting, is the first thing is help people recognize, or help yourself recognize, what you don't know. So some people have a really hard time, or they just don't see the gaps in their knowledge. And quite frankly, most people overestimate their abilities to where they're overconfident. That's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what's interesting too, this is a fun little tidbit, is usually the people that are most competent to do the job are the ones that underestimate their abilities. So this is called the burden of expertise. So if you have someone in the room that you see they can do this, but they're underestimating their ability to do so, they're probably competent. You just got to convince them. The other people, you got to show us what we don't know. Help us. Help me help you type thing. The next way to help improve metacognition is to make sure that the people you're asking to help you, or your team, that they actually comprehend the information. All right, so we've got to make a decision, or we've got the situation coming up. There's going to be information. There's going to be data that you're going to present to them, right? So if you give them this information, then let them process it. So a lot of times what happens is we are given information, and then we are asked in a meeting to go ahead and start thinking through decisions. Let's go ahead and start making some decisions. The problem is that when that happens, there's evidence to show that people don't really have the time to make connections to the information. So we need to give them that time. It can be a few minutes, it can be a day. The more complex the information, the more time they're going to need. This goes back to how the brain functions. So think about when you're trying to learn information, especially if it's a hard subject. If you ever studied at night and then put your book away and you went to bed and you woke up and you kind of understood it a little bit better, that's because your brain had time to chunk information and to make connections. So it works the same in this situation. You have a decision to make. Give your people time to process it. Handwriting it or keywords may help, but again, it's the time. And then practice, especially if it's something that has maybe a lot of processes or something they're going to have to present at some point. They need to have that practice of retrieval, which is just retrieval practice, which we all know what that is as educators, but that can come into play. I think that is specific to what the information is. So practice retrieval practice, and then give feedback on that retrieval. So if you're having the people make these decisions and there's information they've got to remember or think about, give them feedback on what they remember. Provide the correct answers if you know. Ask good questions to get you or them to think more deeply about the information. So an example might be, how is this similar to previous experiences or tasks? So this is a mental performance thing as well. If we have, a lot of times we forget that we've done things in that were similar. So we can pull some of the processes that we used or approaches that we used and apply it to some task. But we've got to pick out what is similar. It may not be similar at all. It may be a new task, but most likely what you're asking people to do when they make decisions is probably similar to something they've already done previously. So how is this similar? What might I use that I've already done? What should I do first? Sometimes we get stuck in, I don't even know where to start. So have them or have you ask, okay, what should I do first? It gets you thinking deeply about the process. And then after the fact, what would I do differently? So this is reflective questioning, right? And this is all building on improving that metacognition. Finally, journaling. Journaling with reflective questions can help, particularly if you have a decision to make or you're working with people that it's complex or there's a lot of moving parts, it's going to be drawn out. To improve metacognition, and I could see you tasking, if you have a core group of people that you're having to make decisions, why not have tasks spread out for them during times when you're not having to use them to make decisions, right? So you give them little things just to work on here and there. So Here's your journal prompt for today. How are you thinking and feeling during this process? We use this a lot in research, but particularly qualitative research. We use this a lot in mental performance training. And if you think the people that say, but I don't like journaling, I'm one of those people because I think it's tedious and it's time consuming, right? But one reason I don't like it is because it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me sit down and it makes me be still and think about what's going on up here. Once you get into a routine, it helps. So those are some ways that leaders can help people work on their metacognition to help them get to this point where they're more open to realize they don't know everything. There are things they don't know. And what is that? So I have a second key point, but curious if you have questions about that one.
Well, when you mentioned the idea of metacognition and knowing what you know, frequently in coaching in our profession, we talk about a young coach, and I fit this description when I first became a head football coach. I didn't know what I didn't know, and helping coaches find out what they know what they know. It seems like a focus that I heard in a different presentation just recently about trying to help somebody get better. You focus on their strengths rather than point out their weaknesses. And it just is, am I on the right line of thinking there, helping people build on their strengths?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. And then, you obviously, it's okay. I think we got into this mindset that if you already have a strength, why do you want to keep improving it? Well, because that's my strength. Just because it's a strength right now, there are still things I can do to make it better. And that is part of it. But at some point, we have to, and I don't think this part, metacognition, is about your weaknesses, because what you don't know may actually be a strength for you. You just don't know it yet. And so how is it that we as leaders are able to look at, let's say, a young coach, because I was in that same position. So I think it's about the delivery. A quick way is to take a new coach and say, all right, go run practice today. And don't give them any help with anything. Maybe you give them just kind of a bulleted outline and you say, go run practice today. They're going to realize very quickly there are a lot of things that they didn't think about or they didn't know, right? And so that's a good test. And it may be that you give them tasks that there's a lot that goes into this. And so you're just going to have some fun for a second here and say, all right, here you go. You go do this, and then we're going to debrief after the fact. And, that's kind of a throw you in there type of an example. But I think if you have, it comes down to relationships too. If you don't have a working relationship, a good relationship with these folks, then helping them understand what they don't know is going to be a harder process. So I think the strengths is good, but I also think that, and that's a good way to build confidence. And maybe that's where you start. And then it comes into, okay, great. Now let's talk about some of these other things.
Always great stuff. We're going to take a quick break. We're visiting with Dr. Meghan Bunning of FSU coach, very much an athletic expert. Please stay with us. This is Wednesday Wisdom. We're going to be back with Dr. Bunning in just a minute. We want to thank Final Forms for their support of the Educational AD podcast and Wednesday Wisdom. Final Forms is the leader in athletic registration, but you got to know this. Final Forms is more than just forms. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it's a service that provides schools in the areas of compliance, communication, and even risk management. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with things like mobile accessibility, has reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and about all the forms that are involved with student athletes. Final Forms can help with team communication, with attendance, and even certification management for coaches. And for ADs, Final Forms can help with eligibility, with rosters, and all of the forms that come across an AD's desk. And it does this with secure language translation and ADA compliance. It's time for you to talk to a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps and find out what Final Forms can do for you and your program, go to finalforms.com/Jake. That's finalforms.com/Jake to get started on the Final Forms team. Hey, welcome back everyone to Wednesday Wisdom. Today our guest is Dr. Meghan Bunning of FSU coach, former D1 athlete, D1 coach, works at the Olympic level as a mental performance consultant, and always brings us cutting edge research that we can apply as ADs and coaches. So Dr. Bunning, bring us home on this really cool topic you shared with us today.
Yeah, so I have another key point, and this will kind of be my last. I'm going to give you some strategies, but I wanted to also talk about, we're talking about this confirmation bias. We're talking about Annie Duke's book about making decisions by bets and having a betting mindset. And so the second key point that I wanted to bring up is this diverse perspective, this dissent that we need when we are in a room as a leader trying to make some decisions. So we all, I think as leaders, we know that we need varied voices in the room. So the question would be, are we really doing that? Whoever we are making this decision about, who is it going to affect? And do we have that voice in the room as well as those folks that may not see really what we're doing? So I'll give you an example in higher education. With athletics, with the athletic department. If the athletic department is making decisions around academic advising or anything of that nature, you would think it would be important to have some faculty in the room. So here's the perspective of professors and what they have regulations they have to follow. This is what it looks like as a professor and how that influences the student, that kind of stuff. So having that voice in the room along with athletes, along with the current advisors, and then some administration on the athletic side and coaches even, so that you get kind of that holistic view. So kind of take a look of your voices in the room, and are they representative? And specifically, think about people in roles of creating dissent. So when you have to make a decision, what if you had designated roles for the people in the room to help make those decisions? And I'll give you some examples here. Have you ever heard of the Dissent channel? No?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so, and this comes from Annie Duke's book, but it's seen in the State Department, and it was formed around the Vietnam War time. And basically, it's a group of individuals that the government has formed that helps make decisions on various policy changes. The Dissent channel has been used to make decisions with policies including the Bosnian War, increasing military efforts in Syria, so that was under Obama, and then immigration policy with Trump. The American Foreign Service Association, which is the professional organization of foreign service employees, they actually award members for dissenting views that are productive. So this Dissent channel is a group of individuals that have varying voices, and their roles are different within the channel, but their roles basically are to say, here's a decision that's coming forward, or here's an issue. We need you to tell us why this won't work, or we need you to tell us why it will. So you have dissent in the room on purpose. Another example is red teams. Have you heard of red teams?
No.
Yeah, so these are used by the CIA. And what these teams are, and I'm going to quote Georgetown law professor Neil Catholie here, but he says they are, quote, dedicated to arguing against the intelligent community's conventional wisdom and spotting flaws in logic and analysis. And so Obama's senior officials actually credited the red teams in the takedown raid that killed Osama bin Laden. So basically, again, it's a group of individuals that come in and they say, here's the flaws, here's why this won't work in what you're presenting, all right? So when you're thinking about leadership and you have a group of individuals that you have to make a decision about, I can so see this as a coach working with a team, particularly when it comes to team rules and if team rules have been violated, or a strategy against another team, whatever. But basically saying, all right, your roles over here is I want you to poke holes in this. Here's what we're going to come up with. I want you to poke holes in this. Your role is to tell us, other views. What are we missing here? So we present this information. What did we skip over? You're telling us why this won't work. And then, of course, you have people that are saying this is why it will work. I've actually done class projects that are similar to this, where you have the opposing argument presentations. It's kind of very similar. So when you think about this approach to dissent teams or red teams, whatever you want to call them, there are a couple of things you need to keep in mind. Is that there should be no repercussions, emotional or physical at all, for people expressing these views. So you have to create a safe space. You truly are coming there as adults to have conversations and to use people. That's why I think if you assign people to roles and give them expectations and you lay those clearly out prior to getting into the topic, I think it could work really well. Also, when you're discussing your situation, think and pose questions in terms of probability. So a lot of times we may say, well, I don't think that's going to work. Instead of saying that, what if you said, what's the likely chance that you think this could fail? Well, I think there's a 20% chance that it could fail. So then you're assigning, a percentage of sorts. And so if I say there's a 20% chance that it could fail, well, then that's an 80% chance of success. And so you kind of have to weigh out, and that's a mental way of looking at things too, a mental performance way. So when you see also, if you have decisions that you go forward and there's an unfavorable outcome, you can see that as you experienced that 20%. So it's not that what you did can't be successful, because 80% of the time it can be. It's just you happen to fall into that 20%. So you go back to the drawing board. How can we get this in that 80%? Another point here is to provide what you feel like may be too much detail around the decision to be made. So this means as leaders, you're going to have to be transparent and you're going to have to give information. Even if you think that detail is irrelevant, it may be to you, but maybe not to the team of people that are making the decisions, because that's where you're bringing in the different perspectives, right? They may see different pieces to the puzzle and how it fits. So give all of the information that you are legally and ethically required or could give. Remember, when you're making a decision or this choice, that you're making a bet on what the future could look like. So this is a potential future bet. You can make the best possible decision given the information you have and still have outcomes that are not favorable, simply because you don't know all the outcomes, or even if you provide all the information, you still don't know all of the information. When you're making decisions, try to figure out how unsure you are that something will work instead of focusing on how sure you are it will work. That can help with that confirmation bias too. So if you have someone that says, I'm really sure, and you make them give a percentage, I'm 80% sure this will work. Challenge. All right, so that means you're 20% sure it won't work. Why are you unsure that it won't work or that we shouldn't do this? One way to get people kind of digging and thinking along those lines, instead of just saying, I'm 80% sure it'll work or it'll work, is frame questions as, you want to bet? You want to bet that'll work? And that comes from Annie Duke. I love this because this helps people. When I say, you want to bet, what does that make you want to do?
Well, you're going to evaluate and see how much you want to bet.
Yeah, exactly. And it also can make you want to go find evidence, right? And it makes you want to dig. Of course, you have to challenge that digging for evidence that only confirms that it'll work, right? But if you have people playing different roles in the room, then group A can be digging for evidence that it will work. Group B can be digging for evidence that it won't work, so you can structure it that way. Think about presenting outcomes that you think something will happen or won't in confidence intervals. So if you read research, you'll know, or if you're into statistics, you'll know that we present our findings in confidence intervals. So we are 80 to 85% confident that our data falls within this range or whatever. The reason we do this is because in statistics, we know that we are never going to be able to 100% of the time pinpoint the exact data point that we're trying to go for. So we give ourselves a cushion, 80 to 85%, whatever that cushion you want to be. And so when you present your outcomes that you think something will or won't happen, you're taking some of that pressure off of yourself as a leader and as the person that's having to present the information to. There's wiggle room here is basically what you're saying. And then lastly, embrace the I don't know. As a leader and as a group, it's okay not to know. This was a hard lesson that I had to learn coming up as a young coach and getting in, especially into academia. You have this, I was a leader on my team and, as a coach, and you kind of feel like you have to know everything and you don't. So instead of saying, and this is kind of that mental, how you think of things, I find sometimes people say, well, I don't have a clue about that. I have no idea. When you say that, you yourself are buying into, you know nothing, so it makes you feel like you don't know something. Instead, if you say, I don't know, let me check up on that.
Right.
Let me do some digging on that. It's okay. And people are going to understand that. And I think teaching, you as a leader, teaching the people that you're leading, your coaches, the people in the room, whatever, it's okay not to know. I have found that has been one of the single easiest things that I have done as a professor is just telling my students, I don't know, let me look into that, or I'll bring so-and-so in and find it. And so make peace with not knowing. And that is what I have for you.
That it is a freeing expression when you can admit, hey, I don't know, but let me find out, or let's find out together. I remember as a young AD, I had a coach, we were about the same age and very enthusiastic. He was a real go-getter, but he would frequently come to me and say, this is what I want to do. And then he would say, now tell me why it's not going to work. I think he was, prepared for the negative. And that was years ago, but I liked that because it developed that dialogue. And I started using that with coaches. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'd like you to try this. Now you tell me why it won't work. So I guess I've maybe got that CIA mindset there. So
yeah, well, and if you think about that question in itself can help improve metacognition. Because if you're asking them to poke holes in your theory or plan, they're going to have to think about some things that maybe they hadn't thought about before. And it comes into a realization. So I think that's a great approach.
Dr. Bunning, always great to visit with you. If one of our listeners wants to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, or find out about the opportunities through the FSU, coaching academic programs, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at DRBUNING at Dr. Bunning, and you can email me at m.bunning@fsu.edu.
I really encourage you guys and gals to reach out to Dr. Bunning professionally, and just from an entertainment standpoint, she has a very strong Twitter game. So again, make sure you follow her. Dr. Bunning, FSU coach, thanks so much for contributing again to Wednesday Wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
For listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews get uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again every Wednesday for more Wednesday Wisdom, and just about every day for the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks for listening. We really want to thank our sponsors for helping us with the Educational AD Podcast and Wednesday Wisdom. Sideline Interactive, indoor scoring tables and video boards. They create excitement in the gym, great game day experience, and they can raise over $10,000 every single year. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call them at 832-786-0302. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com. Violet Defense, dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to your school and your athletic spaces. Go to violetdefense.com for more information about their great products. Also want to thank Huddle. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Go to huddle.com, talk to their pros about how they can help you take your teams to that next level. Also want to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com for more information. Hometown ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. They have a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles to help you showcase your school's diverse history along with your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com, or you can call them at 614-981-3589. You can also email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. And finally, we want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. They sponsor the AD Toolbox segment of our podcast. Go to athleticsurveys.com, or you can call them at 1-800-738-6466. You can also email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Thanks again for listening to Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast.